Hello, Patriots, and welcome back to the Patriot Dad channel where we can discuss current events and modern issues, all while keeping it as real as possible. Today, we're kicking off a series about relationships and divorce. As you all might be aware, I am a single father of two small children trying to make my way through this world. Now, I have asked myself many times, what did I do wrong? What happened? Was there something I could have done different? But you know what? None of that matters anymore because the fact is, I am divorced and I have to worry about the future of my two children. Interestingly enough, the mastermind group that I'm a member of taught me a lot about self-control. Self-control is probably one of the things that helped me the most when going through my divorce. So if you're going through a divorce, make sure you keep a calm, clear head and be patient with the process. Sometimes it takes a while, but in the end, that will serve you well. We're going to be doing a reaction today of Pearl's video, This is Why Divorce Rates Are So High. Haven't seen this one before. I've seen some of her content, and I think she gets a pretty bad rap because she speaks a lot about women's issues from the more male perspective. Let's get it pulled up and see what we get.
One story that I found to be really interesting was the pattern of behavior of women that were seemingly traditional and did the traditional wife. They were a stay-at-home mom, and one day they just end up divorcing their husbands, breaking up their entire family. And I know I've had the content where we say, it's wrong to do that. Maybe it's selfish, that sort of thing. But today I'm not really trying to prescribe morality to it, but maybe understand why the women did what they did. So
This should be interesting. Now, this isn't really how things went down in my house. Things went down in my house. It was just over the years. I'd been putting up with way too much nonsense, and eventually I decided that I needed to have some standards. I needed to have some self-respect. And when I was not being respected in my home, I asked her to leave because I can't have my young children in an environment like that.
I got a lot of flack last episode because I said something that maybe surprised the audience. I said it is not better or worse to have a family, have children. Maybe a guy wants to be a bachelor. Maybe a woman wants to be Oprah, call her daddy, whatever. And I said one isn't necessarily better than the other. Now, what did I mean by that? Obviously, we know that women that have family and children tend to have better relationship outcomes the sooner they do that, and they tend to be happier. Like single women over the age of 45 have the highest antidepressant rates, right?
And this is where I think we waited too long. We had children very late. My ex-wife is not old, but she wasn't very young when we had our children. Things had already been set. And I think one of the big issues is when people start pursuing happiness as an end goal and they don't have happiness every day, things get complicated.
So I'm not going to pretend there's no trends and patterns and things that I see in that regard. But the interesting thing that I saw when I interviewed so many people was that it didn't really matter what race, ethnicity, or background people had. People are people, regardless of religion, race, or social class. And some of the rudest or maybe meanest women I'd ever met were from a more conservative background. And then you would meet a OF model who was really kind, caring, and compassionate to everyone in the room. So it made me realize that people maybe aren't as black and white as I thought. So what we see now is an increase in femininity content. And there's a whole sector of YouTube dedicated to femininity. And during this journey, I guess, or you could say process, I really pondered a lot about what femininity is. I never really considered myself particularly feminine. I grew up a tomboy. I was really into sports. I never considered myself a girly girl.
Yeah, she did semi-professional volleyball for a while, lived over in Europe. Like that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't consider her overly feminine, although it does look like, just looking at her look and appearance right now, that she is going more in that direction.
But I had a friend during this process that told me she became feminine. And the interesting thing was I would have femininity coaches on. I would have all of these different women that said they specialized in femininity, but none of them could really describe what it was. None of them could really explain it. And when someone says I became feminine, they would never give me an in-depth, detailed explanation of how they got there, right? So many women made it about hair, makeup, and nails.
I mean, a feminine appearance is a feminine appearance, but being feminine is more than just an appearance.
And, maybe that was part of it. But I didn't think it was as simple as maybe throwing on a flower dress and getting in the kitchen, taking off your shoes, being bare. And you see that on TikTok a lot. And so I started to think about the women that.
Oh, guys, do not go to TikTok for social advice, please. That app is a platform for the Chinese Communist Party to destroy our culture and corrupt your minds. It is not a positive place. You should not be on it. I don't recommend downloading it or using it. Guys, TikTok is cancer to our society. Just disengage from it.
Your shoes, being bare. And you see that on TikTok a lot. And so I started to think about the women that I considered to be the most feminine. And you think of maybe a grandma, an old aunt, and they just made you feel very warm, I guess is the way to describe it. And what I concluded is that femininity at its core is being selfless. It is thinking about others before yourself. So
yes, that makes logical sense, but there's probably more to it than that.
What are some examples of this? One of the most feminine women the most feminine woman I met in my year of shows, she comes on the show and she just starts like baking in my kitchen. And at first you think, what is this woman doing just baking in my kitchen? But she saw that I was really stressed out because we had a ton of people there. And she just figured that people would be hungry and anticipated it. No one had to tell her. And she made the best dessert. Oh my gosh, these desserts were so good. And I thought to myself, that is a prime example of femininity. Now, this woman, it wasn't like, she wasn't even married, right?
But it seems like it's you sensed that there was a need and she was willing to use the skills that she had to try and fill that need. Makes sense.
So she was divorced. She wasn't married. But it taught me that there is a difference between being married and being a wife. Many women get married,
yes,
but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a wife.
And that is true. And that can change over time, guys. That is not something like if you marry a person that is also a wife, and that doesn't mean happily ever after. Disney's a lie. It takes intentionality and it takes work constantly to keep that going. That constant investment in the relationship. If either party stops investing in the relationship, or if you are no longer her best option, don't expect it to continue. Not anymore. Not nowadays.
It's actually something that, she said to me. Okay, so what is a wife? A wife means being a support system to a man.
Yeah.
A wife means thinking of others before yourself. Many women sign up for this role and are not prepared for what it entails.
I think that's true. And I think that's true because Disney and our culture has lied to them about what it is. So when they actually get in the role and they are relied upon and have responsibilities, I don't think they're prepared for it. A lot of the times now, guys, you can go through life without very much difficulty at all. So when you actually are responsible for somebody else's well-being, it's a lot of responsibility. Some people just can't handle that.
It means eating his food every day instead of yours. It means living where he wants to live instead of where you want to live. It means not traveling or going out because you spend too much time away from your kids. It means getting married on his timeline, not yours. Remember, the most feminine woman I met out of 1,000 women was a divorced, unmarried woman in a relationship. But she had that aura that makes you feel at home. And that's how I learned there's a difference between being married and being a wife. So what I noticed the most about the feminine women that I met is they were always looking to be assets and seeing how they could help.
Now, I am curious because she said the most feminine woman that she has met is a divorced woman. What was the reason for that divorce? 70 to 80% of the time, it's the women filing. So what was the reason?
They never had to ask, they would just do. And they'd always think of ways to make their man's day better. So what does this mean? And I saw this clip or this thing on TikTok, right? And I thought it's not this simple, right? But this woman said this is her routine for being a better wife. She said, I want to be a better wife. This is what I'm going to do to improve myself to be better. Wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast for your husband, eggs, bacon, toast, coffee.
Funny thing is, I was already out the door at that point. It's probably another reason my ex didn't like my schedule. When I was on day shift, it's 5:30 to 6. I have an hour commute. I'm out the door by 4:30. So if you want to make me breakfast, you got to get up earlier than that.
Make sure everything's ready by 5:30. Gym from 6 to 7, keep in shape, no excuses. Clean the entire house 7:30 to 9:30, including vacuuming, dusting, mopping the floors. Laundry must be done daily and folded by 10 a.m. Prepare your lunch for your husband by noon, even if he has work. Pack it the night before if necessary. Dinner must be served 6:30 sharp, a fresh home-cooked meal every day, no takeout allowed. Be available for snacks and drinks whenever your husband or his friends are around, especially after 8. Snacks must be homemade. Ensure that the house is quiet after 9 p.m. for your husband's relaxation.
Relaxation? I'm in bed. So far, I have nothing that I disagree with on this list. It seems very nice.
No distractions during his TV time. Go to bed by
TV time, throw that shit in the trash. You have more important stuff to go do. Guys, if you are laying around just watching TV for hours and hours, you could be doing something else. You could be gathering more resources as the provider protector. So go do that. Stop vegging out in front of the TV.
10 p.m. to get enough rest, but only after making sure everything is ready the next day. So what I realized is I think people have a core of who they are. And, one time, a couple of years ago, I asked my dad if he thought that people changed over time. I was dating a guy my dad didn't like too much. And so I was like, Dad, do you think people change, right?
You can't fix him.
And he said, yeah, they do change. They get worse.
Yeah.
So whatever bad quality you see now, you better be okay to live with it because it's going to be worse in 20 years. And my dad just has wisdom like that just sticks with me. He's just a very wise guy. I think it's because he was born before the social media age. They just tend to pay more attention. And so it made me think. Most women today, and men, but especially we in particular, are encouraged, and I don't want to phrase this as a bad thing because it's not necessarily bad. We're encouraged to be very selfish. And we wake up and every decision we make is thinking about ourselves first.
Yes, that is a universal problem. Like she stated, that is not just a woman problem. That is a man problem. That is an everybody problem. You can't go through life only caring about yourself and think you're going to live in a relationship with somebody else. Like it does not work, especially if it's one-sided, guys. In a relationship, if you care about the other person or they care about you and that is not reciprocated, that just breeds resentment. That relationship will not last.
Now, I'm going to give you guys an example where this can be a good thing. A lawyer is not going to become partner at the firm without thinking about himself or himself first. He has to make sure, or she, that they wake up every day and they are the most energized they could be in order to pursue their career. Going after a career that is, that high powered, you have to be selfish to some degree because every decision you're making is to better your career. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In some ways, you can't help others before you help yourself. But many women, you guys saw what I just read. That's not really typical in 2024. And part of my process of interviewing 1,000 women was I learned what the role of a traditional wife was. And I realized how few women actually fulfilled that. And I could probably count on maybe one hand the amount of women that I know that are obedient to their husbands, right? That don't nag him constant. Like it's almost the norm to use backhanded compliments or that sort of thing against men or against husbands. Like, you're just like your father.
Ooh, although my father's pretty great, so that wouldn't necessarily be an insult. But yeah, guys, out of 1,000 women that she interviewed, 1,000, she said she has a handful, 5 or less, that she interviewed that she thought actually would be able to fulfill that traditional role. I think I'm starting to see why divorce rates are so high. Because if both people in the relationship are trying to pursue a career, what bandwidth is there left for the relationship? for the other person, regardless of who the stay-at-home person is. And just from an evolutionary biology standpoint, it's most likely going to be the woman at home, because if the woman is the one working and the man's at home, typically, not always, but typically she will lose respect for him and find somebody else who's doing better than she is. And I don't blame her for doing it, because from an evolutionary perspective, that makes sense. Sorry. Not sorry.
And there's other small things I noticed, like the father's side of the family always had a tendency to be demonized. I saw a TikTok of a girl saying, I realized that I am going to be dad's side of the family to my brothers. And it went super viral because it was so common for the dad's side of the family to be trashed. Because women, in order to survive from an evolutionary point of view, reputation destruction is our biggest weapon.
Yep.
And what I realized is a lot of women do not, and not all, but a lot of women do not know themselves. And they are not aware that they are selfish people signing up for a selfless role.
I don't disagree, but I think that would apply to both also nowadays. I don't think most people that are supposed to pass as men nowadays know themselves either. I didn't for a while. I didn't respect myself. I didn't know myself. But you know what? As soon as I started to learn those things and started to have some self-respect and actually care about the outcomes I had, my relationship ended. Interesting, isn't it?
And what happens is they get married and they play pretend.
Yep.
And in my opinion, you can only play pretend for so long. There are
sometimes 14 years.
There are people that genuinely do change and get better, but I would say that's the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
So they sign up for this role, and every day they have to think of their husband's needs and their kids' needs first. And it's just not who they are. So why did I say that, there's no better or worse choices? Because through this experience, and at first I really did, I thought that every single woman, it would be better for them to have children. I really thought that.
Nope.
Until I met so many women that destroyed their families because they did not know their role. They would leave their husbands.
They also didn't know how to be happy. Like, everybody is pursuing happiness. Like, it's this end goal that once you get it, you're going to have it and you'll never have to give it up. And it's like this quest item at the end of the road that you're going to find happiness and everything's going to be happily ever after. Guys, that isn't how that works. Happiness is a feedback mechanism that your body is telling you you accomplished something and did the right thing. So if you make a habit of doing the wrong things and not accomplishing anything, you're not going to be happy. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to be depressed. That's your body telling you healthy signals to change something. But instead, people nowadays just drink, they do drugs, they get put on antidepressants, they go around and have other relationships, they want to go party, they want to go travel, they want to do all these things to distract themselves from the fact that they aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're not accomplishing anything. That's about it. Like, do those things and you'll probably be a happier person. But then you just get to go do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you get that little bit of happiness every time, but it is not a constant. It is not a feeling that you obtain and you're done. Like, that's not how that works.
Because they outgrew them. There would be mothers that I would see at every event in London, just on their stories, and I would just think, who is watching your children? You can't be an involved mother and be out 4 days a week. There's just no way. Who's cooking your kids' dinner? And you see this online a lot. You see the women looking on Instagram. I've seen women looking on Instagram for a nanny. That's crazy.
What? Yeah, no, if you're going to watch my kids, like, I have to know you. I have to trust you. Like, that is not a, hey, go find a random person kind of job. Like, what?
You guys are there are people that trust strangers with their children. So, and it just made me have the thought that if these women were honest with themselves, they would know they just were never meant to be mothers because they were too selfish for that role. And I didn't necessarily think they were bad people. Sometimes they were kind people. They were nice enough, but you could just tell every decision in their life was for themselves. And I saw this with Lauren Southern. She spends years traveling the world, building up her career. Not a bad thing, right? And then signs up for a role where you have to think about everyone else's needs first.
Motherhood.
And if you haven't practiced for that role, a lot of women get overwhelmed. Or they get sick of playing a role that they weren't built for after 20 years and then end up leaving their husbands and their families. And you see this in a lot of their videos. The interesting thing is, I tell you guys this stuff, and you can go on TikTok and find a woman just admitting this. And
Yeah, I stay off TikTok. That place is cancer. But she's not wrong. I see tons of men's content on YouTube that is just people reacting to TikTok content. Tons of it. And these women are usually sitting in a car for some reason in the passenger seat, recording themselves, just admitting to all kinds of depravity and nonsense for the world to see. All for what? Internet attention points? It's crazy. That's that selfishness that she's talking about right here.
phrases that they tend to use is, I lost myself. And when you first hear that, you think, that sounds crazy. What do you mean you lost yourself?
You never knew yourself.
But what you come to understand is what they're actually saying is, I was a person before I got married. I got married, and part of getting married is giving up parts of yourself. If you were a woman and you used to go to the club every weekend, part of getting married is giving that up and watching your kids.
Yep.
And they miss that old version of themselves. And maybe they had friends and they watched their friends do all the things that they wished they could do. Maybe it's pursuing hobbies. Maybe
Single friends are keeping people single. They will drag you back down like a crab in a bucket.
it's going to the club. Maybe it's that. And then at 40 or 45, but you see they were fooling themselves into thinking they were something they were not. And the other issue is we're attracted to 10% of men. So a lot of if you go higher and higher up the success hierarchy and the options hierarchy of men, the less, I guess, BS the guy is going to put up with because you can be easily replaced.
True.
So some of the women were pretty good looking, but if you go after, say, a corporate attorney and you get to marry him or you get to be his wife, right? A guy like that you're not going to get your way as much as, say, if you married, I don't know, a more laid back job, maybe
Like Simp McGee down the road.
an engineer, something like that, right? Those guys tend to be a little more laid back. But the problem was, as women, a lot of times we don't think a lot of this stuff through, where maybe they liked the guy, but they were not realistic about who they were and what kind of lifestyle they'd want to lead.
They also eventually seem to convince themselves that they settled for the person that they married. If you're going to make a statement like that and then turn around and violate your vows, your original vows, you either didn't understand them or they meant nothing to you and you said them anyway. That's not a good sign. That displays you have pretty low integrity with yourself and others. You have to have high integrity with yourself first and with others. Number one.
Okay, now I'm going to pull up a couple of examples.
Single mom in your 40s pipeline? Yes, that's being exposed.
So what do y'all know about how I spent my 20s? So this is a conversation that's being had, but a lot of the stories right now are like, well, he left me with 4 kids, whatever. So I left, but let's talk about how
Welcome to Coffee Talk with your host, Linda Richmond.
It's like 2 p.m, so today we are actually having a Dr. Pepper talk, so that's all right. You know what I mean?
What is happening? Anybody?
Thought I was going to come with receipts? Wait.
See, this is why the guys will say vetting women doesn't work, because one day you get the left, one day you get the right. That's the other thing. You would be surprised how much people's opinions change in their lifetime.
Yeah.
So obviously the environment I was raised in was fairly conservative with a lot of gender roles and a lot of stuff like that, right? But I was raised by essentially a single mother, even though
Red flag number one.
she was married sometimes and stuff like that.
Okay, so this is another phenomenon I saw. I would meet people from traditional countries, and I would meet a lot of second generation immigrants that were like their parents were from a more traditional country. And I couldn't count the number of times that I heard them say that the traditional mother who was married to her husband for 30 years told the daughter not to get married.
Which is crazy.
Or to delay that as soon as possible. Or another one is that the stay-at-home mom is a single mother.
And so when I grew up,
That what? If your man is out there going and killing a paycheck and bringing it home, you are not a single mother. You are child rearing, and he is providing, protecting. Those are roles. Those are traditional roles. What do you mean you're a single mom? No, you're not. You're in a relationship.
up and had my own kids, my trauma response to things that I was lacking in my childhood was to go completely the other way. Like, I'm not going to work. I'm going to be the president of the PTA. I'm going to be there 24/7, all of that stuff, which I was happy when I was.
Okay, so her early childhood is what? It's very selfish. Not bad, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that stuff. But all the decisions she's talking about are for herself.
And it wasn't this thing that I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? But looking back,
No.
there was no me in there.
No, I think it was all you.
No, I started working really young, so I'd already had quite a career. So when I met my second ex-husband, we decided to get married. We
My second ex-husband.
decided we wanted to do things old school. We wanted to do the traditional gender roles. He went to work, I stayed home with the kids, and all of this stuff. And at first, it was amazing, and I got to do everything I wanted to do, and I could make the kids, you know, my kids never ate baby food that wasn't something that I made, and stuff like that, which was an amazing part of it. But as time went on, I realized
She reverted back to her original self.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. It was like a novelty for her. Like, yay, I'll get to be a stay-at-home wife. Yay, it's novel. Hey, this is neat. It's different. It's interesting. And back to the club, back to the whatever, back to the old life. You hate to see it.
Because you can only put up an act for so long.
I was not in any way an equal part of our home.
I have a comment, and I'll just keep it to myself for now.
It started with like smaller things that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily just like, oh, okay, well, it's his job. And, you know, I am the one who stays home and this is for me and I need to figure this out. Like, you know, I need you to watch the kids for me once a week so I can go to therapy. No.
Okay. Now she's starting to get entitled
And going to therapy. Does she have a male therapist by any chance?
and resentful. I want this. You're not giving me this. And again, when you meet the super feminine women, it's just a different experience. They make you feel so warm and they would never throw it in your face if they.
This reminds me of like my grandmother, sweet lady. She was a widow for my entire life, but homemade stuff made you feel great. Always fun to listen to her stories. Just being around her made you smile. Yeah.
Do something nice for you.
You know, I might have to work. I can't commit to that. Okay. I want to go to college. I never got to do that. I started
Again, entitlement.
working real young and did all that stuff. Oh, well.
So she saw her friends go to college and she thought, wow, I want to go to college. Starts to resent the husband even more.
Yep.
Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay? Okay. And one of the biggest wake-up calls I got was when my son was going through his diagnosis journey, and because of the values that we're rocking on, it was, oh no, there's nothing. You just want that. Like, wouldn't even go to appointments with me, wouldn't entertain, even though
Anyone want to venture a guess? I'm guessing that their child thought they were a different thing than they were born. I'll just leave it at that. But this whole thing of like, you wouldn't even go with me, like, it's this entitlement. It's this crazy idea that just gets churned over in your head that like, it's the resentment and that like, oh, it's us versus them or me versus them. Like, it's the father versus me and the kids. It's just such a, here, let me use one of their words. It's a toxic trait for a relationship.
things were pretty obvious, things were, you know, doing a thing. And so it just really
So the mindset a more traditional woman would have is that she's happy to help, where a woman that's a bit more modern is going to resent her husband for not doing the things with her.
time, it was really, really clear.
And guys, if your husband or your man is successful enough, he doesn't have time for these things. He doesn't. He's always going to be working, guys. Like, when I'm not working, I'm working on YouTube. When I'm not working on YouTube, I'm raising my kids. When I'm not raising my kids, I'm doing housework or cooking. When I'm not doing one of those things, I'm studying, I'm learning, I'm developing skills. When I'm not doing that, I'm creating other types of content. I'm helping out my community. All of these things are to bring value to others and eventually, maybe, value for myself. A successful man is not going to have time to do all these things with you. And you're not going to respect him if he does, because then you're going to wonder, why is he always there holding my hand? Why is he always there doing this and that? It's this difference between what people say they want and what they actually want. And that is such a huge gap nowadays. I don't know how you get past it. Does somebody maybe just leave me a comment or something about where you go from there?
That even though I had someone paying my bills, I was completely on my own, and I also hadn't
You weren't on your own. He was paying your bills, providing a home, a safe home, provide, protect. That's his job. You had those things.
created any nest egg. I hadn't done anything for myself. Like, I started cosplaying to put away a little money and doing stuff like that. But the more and the more I got out into the outside world and started saying things or repeating things, I realized this is not kosher. But once I started trying to work more outside of the home and put away a nest egg and do that sort of stuff, guess what? No one's sharing domestic duties with me. So then you're in trouble all the time and getting baskets of laundry dumped on your head because this is your job. And, you know, it was really a traumatic time. But then...
So you stopped doing your role to pursue your own thing. Yeah, I can see why this relationship might have ended.
After all those years of suppressing who I really was, guess what happened? I lost my ever-living shit. I lost my absolute ever-living
Yep, you couldn't keep hiding it.
shit, had a complete nervous breakdown.
They crash. I mean, think about how exhausting it's got to be someone you're not. And that's, I guess, sometimes why I poke fun at the corn star overnight preachers. I mean, this is why we roll our eyes at that kind of stuff.
What was that, Nala? She made a bunch of videos about that girl and was just all over her case on X. I can't remember the name, but yeah, agreed.
Because a conversion story is great, and I'm sure it happens, but there's a saying that a tiger never changes his stripes or something like that. Maybe it's a
Or loses their stripes.
leopard never changes his spots, hides his
Sure.
You guys have to remember in the chat.
I'll go with that.
And so it's exhausting to them because they're trying to be something that they're not. And then 20 years later, they say, I wish I missed who
wasn't.
I was before all of this.
Yep.
And that's why I say, know thyself, know who you are.
Was not anyone that I wanted to be for a couple years. And all because I spent a long time really suppressing who the hell I was. What the
So
Here's the crazy thing, guys. Why are you getting into a relationship while suppressing who you are? Think about that for a second. You were in the marketplace long enough to realize that the person that you really are was not marketable to somebody else. So you pretended to be somebody else to trick them into a relationship and then reverted to your natural self. Wow. Just wow.
sometimes, guys, when we say mumbo jumbo and they're like, that makes no sense, I can decipher it. You're welcome. I can decipher it.
fuck I needed. And not taking care of myself and not setting up a future for myself.
Yeah. So again,
Not setting up a future for yourself is a weird comment because you shouldn't have to. Your man is doing that for you, as long as you're doing your job. But then we also have these courts that'll give women half without question. This uncontested divorce now in all 50 states, they can just decide that they want to go be themselves again and take half of what you spent 10 years building. And the court will do it. It happened to me. It's happened to many other people. It cost me $170,000. How long do you think that took to build on a average salary? How much thoughtful investing do you think went down the drain because my significant other could no longer pretend to be something she wasn't? Guys, marriage is a dangerous, dangerous game nowadays.
she has a more selfish mindset. And she's saying, I did not set up a future for myself and I didn't take care of myself. So she did not know the role that she was signing up for.
Yep.
Now, people of modern marriages, they figure out all different types of stuff.
The other thing that's interesting about that is, why wouldn't she know the role she was signing up for? Who didn't prepare her? Oh, her single mother who had a few husbands herself. Guys, these broken homes are breeding more broken homes. And now I have to fight tooth and nail to make sure that my kids have a better outcome than me, which means giving more to them than I probably can afford to give. But you know what? They can't afford that I don't. Over a year that I've had sole custody of my children, and it has been amazing watching them grow up. And I have gotten so little sleep that it's kind of silly. And I live on coffee. But you know what? You do what you have to do. And I do it happily. And I do more than I probably should. My parents think I'm crazy. My peers think I'm crazy, which tells me I'm probably doing the right thing. I'm just not sleeping.
Of air fryers and Roombas now. There's different ways of living, right? People come up with all different types of solutions, but this was just one pattern that I saw in the women that opted for something, but they were not that. Again, it's not to say right or wrong. It's just saying if a woman like this knew herself a little bit better and was honest about what she wanted, you know, maybe she would just go get the equal partner that she was looking for and they could go do that. But that's not the type of woman that's really qualified for what he was asking for.
Nope.
And trust me, there's a lot of guys out there. They want to do the 50-50. They're like now I'm not saying all, but there's enough.
I tried that for long enough. Ain't worth it. I have more self-respect than that nowadays. 50-50 ain't where it's at.
I mean, this would be like a perfect cougar woman. She totally would be. This is like the type of woman that would date a guy 20 years younger. And it would be a win-win for both because the young guy would get the kinky stuff, whatever. The girls his age don't want him. And then the old lady gets the attractive guy and she doesn't have to listen to him. Boom. Problem solved, lady. Now, they would obviously end badly, but, you know, it could keep her entertained for like a decade. I think that's a win-win.
No, I'm not saying don't do this, but what I'm saying is just make sure you're going to therapy.
The reason people are in therapy is because their body is giving them signals that they're all screwed up, that they are making the wrong decisions, that they're pursuing the wrong things. And yet people are so focused on doing the same shit over and over. They don't look inward and say, hey, maybe I should change something so that I don't feel this way. Instead, they keep doing the same dumb shit and then they go pay a therapist to tell them, oh, you should worry about your feelings. Oh, he's just being mean. And then they go to their friends and their friends say, oh, he's just being oppressive and he's just taking advantage of you. And they just bathe in all of it. Or how about you just go do the right thing, change your behavior and go do the right thing. And then you'll probably be happier.
Constructing your stuff. And I'm talking somewhere outside of like church and stuff like that, because that's who I was talking to too. And there's more women who have my story or who have similar stories or even he left or whatever than there are that have the other one. And that's why like this video had said, which I strongly suggest go watch it.
Yeah, and I would agree. That's why I said out of 1,000 women, how many would I say were traditional or feminine? Maybe 10.
Oh, okay. 2 hands.
15. One, our society does not encourage people to be selfless, and we're told being selfish is a good thing. And 2, I think emotions are something that people struggle with, and they're very difficult to overcome. So,
yeah, but they also don't serve men well. Men that are highly emotional lose custody of their kids, get raked into the divorce, end up in prison. Men should not be highly emotional. Men need to have very, very tight control of their emotions. It's not that you can't have them, but you can recognize them briefly and say, that sucks. Okay, what's next? Because that's just the life that men have. It's just the way it is.
I would say it's more the exception than the rule to find truly selfless people, people that think about everyone else before themselves. And it's not a bad thing. It's not one's not necessarily better or worse. They just have different outcomes.
Yep.
You don't see women my age really advocating for this lifestyle. Like, I think it's cool if that's what you want to do. Just make sure that you CYA, and when someone my age says,
if you're doing CYA, you are not invested in that relationship.
Something like that to you, don't first go, oh my God, she's bitter. Maybe we've seen some shit. You know what I mean?
Which is why we don't want to deal with people that struggle pair bonding, that have slept with a bunch of people, that have been just put through the ringer for their 20s and 30s. Like, it's just not interesting to us anymore because of stuff like this.
I mean, you are bitter, but let's not. I mean, you're not going on TikTok airing out your husband's dirty laundry without being a little bitter. Let's not.
And good luck, and I'm proud of you no matter what you do. Oh, but here's the kicker. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%.
Wow. Great way to end that video. Would I do it again? Absolutely 100%. Just wow. But yeah, guys, I think a lot of it is you look in our media, you look in our movies, for the last few decades, men have been portrayed as buffoons and idiots Women have had to come to the rescue. The girl boss mentality has been prevalent. They're pushing women to pursue education and careers, which is fine, but you need to understand the result of that. And the result of that is going to be that you're going to struggle in relationships. You're either going to butt heads and separate, or you're going to have a lack of respect for your partner and separate, or you're going to miss the single life and separate. This is part of why, and as much as people want to crap all over it, marriage happened very young and kids happened very young. It was not a control mechanism. It was just a way to ensure that the relationship was one of your first and that you didn't fill your head with a bunch of experiences that you might miss later in life, and you were raised by a mother and a family that valued those beliefs. And usually social pressure was applied to keep you in those positions. Just like social pressure is applied to men to provide and protect, just like social pressure is applied to men to go be successful, to make sure that your family has the resources that it needs, to make sure that you're in good shape. All kinds of social pressures are applied to both sides. This is why divorce rates are so high. I agree. I think that was a good clip. Let me know what you think. Thank you to those of you that made it to the end of the video. I greatly appreciate your support. If you're looking for other ways to support the channel, please check out the links down in the description below. You can take advantage of the ongoing offers or use our promotion code when purchasing coffee from Coffee Brand Coffee. I still prefer blend 1, black, no cream, no sugar. So take advantage of any of their offers today. Just make sure to use our promo code when you go to checkout and help out the channel there. If you're looking for a free way to support the channel, you can like the video, you can leave a comment on the video, you can share the video with friends and family, or you can subscribe to the channel. I encourage you to do any and all of those because every little bit you help out with the algorithm helps the channel. Every bit you help the channel allows me to provide more content. If you have a recommendation for a future topic or song that you want to see a reaction to, please make sure you leave it in a comment below and I will get to it as soon as I can. Let me know what you think about this new series. We're going to be doing a collection of them because single fatherhood is part of my story. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves and God bless. Go ahead and check out one of the links on the screen now to either subscribe to the channel and see the rest of the videos of the channel or one of the carefully selected videos that you may wish to see that YouTube has used its algorithm to select for you.